Now, the New York Times versus ChatGPT I've referenced several times, but I also found an interesting comment in my last episode that challenged the way that I framed the New York Times content being able to be pulled out of ChatGPT almost verbatim. I quoted 85%, which was what was quoted in the legal documents. And if you look at them, we'll show you a whole bunch of them from what's called Exhibit J. There's just tons of them. And what you see are these small little snippets. Remember that word. These little snippets, little like pages. They put a sentence or two, said, here's the beginning. Now, can you tell me what the next sentence is in the article? These are all using articles printed by the New York Times. And so they showed them, but they were all short snippets. I didn't see one single article, which is what I was prompted by in the comment to take a look at it, because Sven Werner, who runs his own Substack, was talking about New York Times being misleading in the way they positioned it. So I went in and I'll talk to you about the Guy Fieri viral comment that I saw, and that showed a lot of content that was similar. If you're watching on the screen, you can see it. All it is a bunch of text. If you see it highlighted in red, that means what's similar. So here it is. Guy Fieri has, I think it was about an 85% accuracy rating. New York Times says this is one of hundreds. They show example after example and say, look, they're taking all our content. But not once did I see the complete article pulled out, but I didn't even think about it until I went to Sven's blog, who was also looking at it and saying, wait, this is not an entire article. This is a snippet. In fact, what was pulled out, he compared to the actual article. Great article he wrote, by the way. You should read it. And he found about 20% was used. So 20% of the article had 85% violation. But remember, the New York Times was doing all sorts of things to influence the output, including things most of us can't do today. But his argument was that the New York Times also claimed memorization. And he shows within a standard large language model, this is really basic. I should have been looking at this myself. Large language models do what's called reconstruction. They put together different pieces, starting with tokens, putting together words. There's a whole science to it, but nothing is actually sitting there like the New York Times claims in memory. And so he had a great point about memorization, is that that's actually reconstruction of a pattern, because let's say we're looking up Hamlet, to be or not to be. We're going to obviously find that passage. We could probably find the whole play. Now that's non-copyrightable, right? That's old. But the same thing applies to a New York Times article, or especially one written about Guy Fieri that went highly viral on social, that had lots of people writing, commenting, putting stuff out. All of that makes it a higher probability that that content would have been in ChatGPT. So what I got from that Substack article by Sven was an eye-opener that this is not only misleading, but they're not really pulling out full articles. The way they're doing it is not the way a normal user would do it, or could do it now. If you paid $20 a month at ChatGPT, I shouldn't say this, some of you are great prompters and hackers, maybe you can do it. But for the general public, it would take an enormous amount of work to try to reproduce what's already been created. This case is not about copying snippets. It's about the New York Times versus ChatGPT and the competition for so many things that the New York Times creates. Of course, they don't want ChatGPT to take it in, and this suit has been going on a while. So remember that right now, there's all sorts of media companies, large ones, that have settled. Axios, Axel Springer. There have been a lot of media companies that have settled with OpenAI. Clearly, what these lawsuits generally end in is licensing. So the one standing, the New York Times, is trying so hard to prove on the output, because it usually tells me they can't really prove on the input. And a lot of the scraping and buying of data and billions of data points, ChatGPT may become a news source. ChatGPT may take subscribers away from the New York Times, or at worst, if you could go into ChatGPT and get the New York Times without paying them, that's obviously what all this is about. At some point, they should play together, but judging of the length and the intensity of both sides, and everyone watching this is the case, it's surprising not to see some major licensing deal come out of it, because the text that they're showing are not yet complete articles, they're snippets. And does AI have the right to show excerpts and portions of things that have been around social media and the cultural milieu for so long, they become almost self-evident, easy to find? Or is that just another AI hustle to avoid the responsibility of the content that went in?